Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys in a Stack of Comics. It is Sunday, so it's another edition of our Watchmen Challenge. Mike and I are working our way through about 10 or so of the best classic comics of all time and truly trying to answer what is the greatest comic of all time? Does it hold up to Watchmen? We're kind of using Watchmen as the standard. So each week we're reading a chapter of one of these classics. And then when we have finished, we will do a video breaking it down in comparison with Watchmen, kind of end up with a rankings board at the end of the greatest comic of all time. We started with DC, The New Frontier, as the first challenger. Mike, you've got a more classic edition there. This is the recent compact one that came out. If you guys want to read along with us, it's absolutely a fun and worthy read for you. And you can even do all that for about $10 with these compact editions. But we're on part three, chapters 5 and 6. Mike and I are going 2 chapters at a time with this. I think there's 18 total. So probably about 9 weeks for us to get through. We'll kick it to chapter 5, Mike. I know this is Darwin Cook, The New Frontier. This is one of your all-time favorites, so I will lead it to you to kick us off with where we start in chapter 5 and your initial thoughts.
For those of you, and there are many of you that saw the New Frontier DVD animated film and think you know the New Frontier story. Yes, you do, but in the comic, there is so much extra. And this scene here with the boxer,
Ted
who
Grant, Wildcat.
Ted Grant, the Wildcat, is one of those scenes that a lot of it got edited out. In fact, in if I remember right, in the movie, they just pan across the scene of the boxers, or
Yep.
the show bill for the fight. They don't even go into it. But in the comic, they go, pretty much blow by blow into this boxing match where we get introduced to Wildcat. So it's really awesome. Classic 1950s Las Vegas. Look at how beautifully Darwin draws 1950s Las Vegas. So iconic, right? And
Mm-hmm.
this chapter is just breathtaking. The amount of detail to the era, the clothing, the backgrounds that he does, and the brutalness of the fight. I always love this little scene. Like, we don't know where his head's at, and he's like unconscious on the mat, like dreaming he's in a pool with two ladies.
No, it's one of the things that stands out to me so much about Darwin, and we talked about this in part one and part two, and I think it's a recurring theme that you see here. His ability to make you instantly connect with a variety of characters in such a short span. It is very similar, because we're doing comparisons to Watchmen, to the way that in that first chapter of Watchmen, how quickly you know Rorschach, and how quickly you know Dan, and how quickly you know John. And that's such a masterwork for him of Wildcat's not a character I know a ton about outside of his crossovers and different events that he's been involved in with Batman. One of the cool things here is you get this cool little 10 page, it's a little Rocky Balboa fight for
Yeah,
10 pages in it with, great art. You get this fantastic kind of final page of him being victorious. And, you put that in with the history of the JSA and this comic book being heroes that were forced into retirement. It's such a cool scene mixed with, as you said, the classic Las Vegas stuff and a lot of the really cool DC touches of like Bruce Wayne is on a date with Selena Kyle while he's
look at
there.
that. There
Yeah,
they are, watching their ringside, watching the boxing match, and it's Selena Kyle,
Bruce
and
Wayne, Dinah Drake, and Oliver Queen. And
yeah.
so, yeah,
Interestingly enough, Bruce, I believe, is on a date with Lois Lane.
yeah, they make it where he's yes, because it's interesting, and you get Lois Lane in
Yeah.
there as well. You have Iris West show up here, and we'll get to your favorite part of the issue. But again, it's these cool character touches, and what I have such respect for what Darwin Cook did in this is we've talked about this a little bit before, but this reminds me somewhat of Watchmen. there is no main character of this story. He is truly telling a DC universe story. And so, where most writers, there would be here's the part where Batman enters the novel and he takes over the rest. There is
Right.
really no huge narrative point that takes over. You are just experiencing the DC universe and these different events that make it make sense. And he does such a good job of layering these characters in ways where it's like, oh, that doesn't feel like a forced Batman cameo. That does feel like something he would do. It does feel like something him and Oliver Queen being billionaires would be at a Las Vegas fight like this. It works really, really well. So
Can
I
I
think just a
just
fantastic character building stuff there.
let me just show off these 6 panels of everything you ever dreamed 1950s Las Vegas would be. And look at the blue tone to the coloring. It just has a breathtaking effect, like totally setting the stage in the era. So not only do you get great storytelling with this huge ensemble cast, but you also get this magnificent art, stylized artwork that totally takes you to the era.
You know, yeah,
And
the aesthetic stuff of like the 50s and things like that he's incorporating in there.
just
Um,
brilliantly done.
really, really cool to see him do that and to see it, repeatedly done throughout the novel. We kick to your favorite part, I'm sure, Mike, of
Yeah.
this graphic novel. We get Central City, and I'll let you take over from there, my friend. And that I know this is the part you most love of this graphic novel.
You get Barry Allen chilling in his apartment back in Central City, talking to his gal Iris on the phone, and she's just, saying what a wonderful time she's having. And then all of a sudden, Captain Cold breaks in to the casino for a heist. And he sees Iris talking on the phone, and he freezes her hand with the phone. And that's the Flash's cue, like, what, Iris? And he runs off to save Iris, of course. And it's just amazing. I like what he did with, his depiction of the speed and everything, and the close-up of the eyes,
Hmm.
and how he races out of Central City, but he waits until he gets past the city limits to go into full speed, right? High gear. And of course, he rushes in and saves the day, and foils an intricate little, supervillain criminal plot, replete with lady henchmen, in parkas.
Yeah, got to get
And
the theming.
in a few pages, he tells a whole comic book story arc of the Flash, and how he rescues, Las Vegas and everybody. And I like the way he drew the blur there and the helicopter, and you know, he just does a great job. I mean, this would have been a great issue of the Flash from 1958 or 1959. This would have been great. It's perfect. It's perfect. Like he told a perfect Flash story of Flash and Captain Cold.
No,
And
it's what's so cool that he does in that Flash scene. I love that he writes Barry the scientist.
yeah,
Barry's in the entire the internal monologue that you get from Barry is about him using his speed and how he has to use physics and different elements of things to figure out what to do. I love the little touch if he doesn't break the sound barrier until he leaves the city limits because he knows
yeah,
that could be dangerous. The way that he employs and stops the bombs against Captain Cold, I think all that's so cool, and it just shows how much Darwin knew about this character. That even for a 10 to 12 page portion of this huge, 400-page thing that he's writing, he puts so much attention into detail to get it right. I also do love a little bit too of the Flash being like when he stops Cold and Cold just turns into an icicle. Like you don't mess with my Iris. I
yeah,
love that there is because Barry, he can be nerdy, he can be distant, but I love there is that no, this is a superhero. This is you went after his girlfriend. He's going to
yeah,
take that personally, and I think it's a really cool character trait to put upon the Flash. It's such a showcase of the character. I know why you love that scene so much. It truly makes me wish there had been some long Darwin Cook run on the Flash, just with as
Oh
a
yeah.
writer, not even as an artist. I think he did an amazing job, but I think him writing the Flash, given how much he seemed to get the character, could have been an amazing thing. It's one of those things sadly we'll never get, but that's one of the things about a great writer is they give you these snippets where you're like, man, I would have loved to have seen that
Yeah.
expanded over a long amount of time. But really cool stuff. We get some other character beats. Lois Lane, very cynical. She's very on Superman's side. Doesn't really like any of the superheroes who aren't following along with the government. So I thought an interesting way to position Lois. We kind of pivot then, Mike, and we go to a little bit more of Hal Jordan, who is probably the closest thing there is to a consistent person in this, and he's the only one who appeared in all of the issues so far. We get him kind of discussing his thoughts on the war and how he hasn't felt different. We know he's an experimental pilot and going through these different things. Um, Mike, for me, where that stood out, and I think this is something that Darwin Cook does really well. And I think when we talk about these classics, it's the difference between why these work and some of these modern comics don't. These pages where Hal Jordan is largely just going through and talking about trauma from the war and what it's doing to his life and how it's affecting him as a pilot. It's all dialogue, and that could be really boring, but it is written and based on events that we've seen, and it is written with such care that you're like, you are invested in what is happening in those pages just as much as the action scenes. To me, that was something that really stood out. How did that hit you?
Oh yeah. I mean, when he goes into dialogue, it doesn't get boring. Or like for example, when Hal Jordan's writing home,
Mm-hmm.
you all those letters to his brother, and it's good. I mean, it's all good. And the introduction of the challengers of the unknown. Like, why are they in there? Well, they're in there because they were important 1950s DC characters. And there's going to be a payoff somewhere, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But for Hal, you're exactly right. Um, the dialogue is important, and he's the closest thing we get to the protagonist, a singular protagonist in this ensemble cast, which is vast. It has everybody in it.
One,
But
I love that he includes the challengers, and that, again, it's that dedication of Darwin Cook to know I'm telling a DC story. And I think it's really cool that even some of these characters, if you haven't read DC in a while, you see some of the characters. Who is that? When they're like, oh, it's Challengers of the Unknown, and that's
yeah,
that's what's really cool. Is this was a guy who loved DC, and that kind of peers through. And I think that's what's so interesting is when you contrast it, some of these things that this is compared to. Watchmen was a deconstruction of superheroes. It was a takedown of what superheroes were if they were in the real world. This is absolutely a celebration of superheroes. It's a celebration of DC Comics. It's Darwin mining, as you say, this huge opportunity of what happened between this unexplained period of time. But him also it's a love letter to these characters. And as DC fans, it's so cool to see that, even for small characters like Ted Grant or the Challengers of the Unknown who get their moment.
and in this, with Hal,
Hal and Carol Ferris.
just beautifully drawn. It's just amazing, you know.
Yeah, no, we get a little date night scene there, and again, really good dialogue. Gives us so much about the two characters, and obviously with Green Lantern, huge dynamic to maintain that. We kind of get a little bit more of the Dinosaur Island stuff starts visiting. We revisit with Task Force X. We get this. Honestly, again, this is where Darwin Cook just kind of cool imagination guy. I mean, guy blowing up a dinosaur outside of the Statue of Liberty. That's just what comic book kind of stuff that you love to see. And again, that's part of what makes this so fun is you can tell he was having fun writing this. He's honoring the history of the characters, but there is just scenes like that where it's like that seems like something out of a 2000s action movie, but it's cool to see on the page and have
Oh
fun. And
yeah,
I think that's what he always remembers, that comic books are supposed to be fun. And I think he does such a great job of that.
there it is.
Yeah.
Dinosaur blown up in front of in and then we get the introduction of John Henry. You want to
Yep.
take that one?
No, so you get John Henry's introduction again. What I like about Darwin, unapologetically looking at the 50s, where there's some ugly things that are in there as well. And so you see the tragedy of what happens with John Henry and what happens to his family. Um, I think one of the things is this is where I think sometimes Darwin Cook gets discredited where he doesn't deserve to be because of his art style. It does look a little cartoonish and fun, but he has a lot of depth that he explores in this book. And one of the things is The John Henry page, it's somber, it's brutal, but it's not over the top. And I think that's like you have always said when they talk about these political issues, you have to have this deft touch. And it doesn't show too much horror. It doesn't dive into too much where you're like, okay, now we're in a different sort of thing, but it doesn't shy away from what happens either. And I think
Right.
that's one of the things that really separates Darwin Cook, in my opinion, from so many is this book does touch on some real world issues, but it's done with such a deft touch that he can weave it in where you never get removed fully from the DC universe, even though you're dealing with things that happen in the real world.
Yeah, I agree. And here they are in flying over Dinosaur Island. Beautiful, beautiful panels with the clouds and everything.
No, then we get they revisit, they find the story of the losers. So we get a little bit of some full circle stuff here as they sort of explore the island and find, and then it's a living thing, and we get to see, the island almost literally comes to life and swallows them whole, and we kind of leave on a cliffhanger with that. We pivot back again, Hal Jordan. We get, him going through the California desert, starting to work at Ferris Air. And we get, again, one of the cool things that you mentioned, this little letter he's writing to his brother that he goes through. And we just get, I think what is really cool is Hal Jordan as a character. He sometimes gets seen as like the boring Green Lantern by his detractors. To me, he's always been one of the most unique and cool characters in comic books because I love how they have layered him where he's different than other superheroes as far as he has a family. I've always loved that Hal Jordan has a brother and like nephews that he's communicating with because it's a Batman siloed as the isolated loser, Barry Allen, orphan kind of kid, Superman. He gets a cousin later, but not in his original stuff. I've always loved that they lean into that with Hal Jordan here, and that it's cool that he's like Uncle Hal to some
Yeah,
people or an
yeah,
older
yeah,
brother
yeah.
to someone. It brings humanity to this spacefaring, daredevil character, and I love that he took the time to have him talking to his brothers in that, and that it's one of the cool things that Alan Moore did in Watchmen too is the characters, while very fictional, feel very real. And they
Yeah.
feel, and that's what he does such a good job with these DC characters who sometimes get painted, especially in the Golden Age, Silver Age thing, as these kind of distant, almost godlike figures. He really drags the humanity out of them really well. And I thought that was such a cool touch that he added that in there.
And we get a little backstory. Colonel Flag.
Yep, Colonel Flack. We get some stuff on him as well. And again, that's no character really lost for Darwin Cook in this story. No one shows up and then is forgotten, and I think that's pretty cool that we get that. And then we close out the last part of the chapter with the John Henry kind of getting his full costume here with just some awesome art from Darwin Cook there. And again, you're having a guy attack a Ku Klux Klan rally. You're dealing with some heavy things there, but it never forgets that it's the comic book, and so it's suitably cool to look at. While also you're looking at the historical context and going like, wow, that's a really cool way to integrate that in there, and that kind of wraps us through the first 6 chapters of it. Mike, these two, where we're at for the first three. It's been a while since you've read it. What is the thing that strikes you the most as we're through the third portion of our look at New Frontier?
I really like the extra detail. Because I probably read this about 4 times. This is probably my fifth time reading it.
Mm-hmm.
But I've probably seen the movie about 20 times.
Yeah.
So uh, um, it just ignites my love for the comics because of the extra stuff that's in there. And it's been always my thing, especially with my teenager. It's like if you love a movie, and there's a book about it, read the book
Read the
because
book.
there's always more. If you left that movie and you wish that there would be another one, read the book. You'll find more in there. And definitely that's the case with here because they had to cut, Darwin said they had to take this tome and turn it into basically 90 pages because it's 90 minutes and
Yeah.
screen time, the equation usually equal it 1 page of script for every minute of screen
Mm-hmm.
uh, of film. So they had to cut a lot out. Darwin was still happy with how it turned out. He forced his will on a few things, like Lois Lane, who was going to be written out of the movie. But you get to see all of that, all the extra little details are in there. I still love it. Yeah.
No, it
Uh,
holds up much better than I remember. I read it the first time, and I was more at a point where I was like a Batman fan only sort of thing, or Batman and Superman. And so I was like, what are all these other characters? Like, what? Yeah, and I was probably like 14, 15 when I read it. As I've gotten older, I appreciate this more and more because as a DC Comics fan who has over the years gotten into more and more DC Comics outside of Batman and really loved and grown with all the characters, I love the dedication to Ted Grant and to the Challengers of the Unknown and the entire DC universe. And I think that's so cool that he did that and spent so much time. And none of it feels like cheap cameos. None of it feels like, oh hey, like the Marvel sort of, hey, we mentioned this person's name real fast.
right.
All of it seems to be integrated in a genuine way into the plot. It really stands up really really well. Comparing it to Watchmen at this point, still a little early. Got to see how it ends and sticks the landing, but it's really really great. And I'd say if you have not read this in a while, like Mike said, I think sometimes you read something once or twice and certain points stick with you, and then you forget everything else that's there. And I certainly that one of my favorite part of these two chapters we read was the Ted Grant fight of like here's this little Rocky Balboa-esque fight that you get in there. And it's such a cool moment. And it's something that like totally, like you said in the movie, it gets skipped. And honestly, even though I've read this 3 or 4 times, I kind of forgot those panels. And so it's cool to revisit that and see it. But that'll wrap up our third part of a New Frontier breakdown. There are 18 chapters total, so we will have 9 weeks where we look at this, and then a 10 week where we break it down between this and Watchmen and kind of rank them before we move on to our next one. So follow along with us if you want, folks. Let us know your thoughts down below, whether you agree or disagree. Fun thing as well, we saw this on the Watchmen videos. If there's something that stood out to you that we missed, something that you're like, hey, you missed this bit of context or there, let us know. We don't take that as a call out or you saying we missed something. We love seeing those additional details if we missed it. So please feel free to drop those down below as well.
And remember, last week at your local comic shop, the compact edition is now on the shelves for
For about, yeah, 10
$9.99.
bucks. I think you can get it cheaper on Amazon. Again, we're not associated with selling these or anything, but if you want to read along, it is available at a good price. So if you want to, some of those ones can tally up the price quite a bit. So if you want one that'll save you some money, this one is here available for you.
Yeah,
As
it's
always,
worth it.
folks, thank you guys so much for watching. We will catch you next week with part 4 of the breakdown, where we go through chapters 7 and 8 of the New Frontier. Thanks as always for watching. God bless you. You have a great rest of your week, folks.
Thanks, everybody.